Electric cars have a cult problem, not a quality problem, not a technology problem, a cult problem. Two cults, actually. On one side, you've got people who act like EVs are the second coming, zero emissions, saving the planet, the future is here, internal combustion is dead. If you're still buying gas, you're basically a caveman. On the other side, you've got people who act like EVs are a government conspiracy. They catch fire, they can't go anywhere, the grid can't handle them, the batteries are made by child labor, and real men drive trucks with exhaust pipes. Both sides are annoying, both sides are wrong about important things, and the actual truth, the boring, nuanced, math-based truth, is sitting in the middle where nobody wants to look because the middle doesn't get clicks. Here's the deal. Electric cars are genuinely impressive technology. They're also genuinely imperfect. They save some people real money. They cost other people more than a gas car would. They're better for the environment in most scenarios. They're not zero impact in any scenario. And whether one makes sense for you, specifically you, your life, your commute, your budget, your living situation, depends on about a dozen variables that no YouTube thumbnail or tweet can capture. So let's do the thing nobody wants to do. Let's be honest. No cheerleading, no fear-mongering. Just the actual math, the actual science, and the actual ownership experience. By the end, you'll know whether an EV makes sense for your life, and you won't need either cult to tell you. Let's start simple. An electric car replaces the internal combustion engine with one or more electric motors powered by a large battery pack. No pistons, no crankshaft, no fuel injectors, no exhaust system, no transmission in the traditional sense. Most EVs use a single-speed reduction gear because electric motors produce usable torque across their entire RPM range. The battery pack is typically the largest, heaviest, and most expensive component in the vehicle. It sits in the floor of the car, a flat slab of lithium-ion cells arranged in modules. This placement lowers the center of gravity, which improves handling and distributes weight evenly, which helps stability. The battery stores electrical energy chemically and releases it to the motor on demand. The motor converts that electrical energy into rotational force, torque, which drives the wheels. Electric motors are remarkably efficient at this conversion. A good electric motor converts over 90% of electrical energy into motion. An internal combustion engine? About 25 to 35%. The rest is lost as heat. That efficiency gap is the foundation of everything that makes EVs work, and everything that makes them economically interesting. Most EVs also use regenerative braking. When you lift off the accelerator, the electric motor reverses its role and acts as a generator, converting the car's kinetic energy back into electrical energy and feeding it back into the battery. This slows the car without using the friction brakes and recovers energy that would otherwise be wasted as heat. In stop-and-go city driving, regenerative braking can meaningfully extend range. Some EVs offer aggressive regenerative braking that lets you drive almost entirely with one pedal. Press to go, release to stop. It sounds weird. It's actually brilliant once you're used to it. Here's the thing that gets lost in all the range anxiety debates and charging arguments. Electric cars are genuinely fun to drive. This is the one point where both cults actually agree, even if they won't admit it. Electric motors produce peak torque at 0 RPM. From a dead stop you get maximum twist. There's no turbo to spool, no transmission hunting for the right gear, no engine building toward its power band. You press the accelerator and the car shoves you back in the seat immediately. The response is instant in a way that even the fastest gas cars can't quite replicate, because gas engines need time, even if it's fractions of a second, to build RPM and deliver power. A Tesla Model 3 Performance, a BMW i4, a Hyundai Ioniq 5N. These aren't just efficient appliances. They're legitimately quick cars that put grins on faces. The Ioniq 5N is specifically designed to be a fun performance EV, complete with simulated gear shifts and engine sounds for people who miss the drama of a gas car. Whether that's cool or sacrilege depends on which cult you belong to. EVs are also remarkably smooth and quiet. No engine vibration, no exhaust drone, no gear changes interrupting the acceleration. The ride quality, particularly at low speeds, is serene. Some people love this. Others find it too sterile and miss the mechanical feedback of a gas car. That's a legitimate preference, not a flaw. The low center of gravity from the floor-mounted battery pack gives most EVs excellent handling characteristics. The weight is low and centered, which reduces body roll and corners and makes the car feel planted. Even EV SUVs handle better than you'd expect for their size and weight because the mass is in the best possible position. The driving experience argument is real, and it's one of the strongest selling points for EVs, particularly for people who've never driven one. Almost everyone who drives an EV for the first time comes away impressed by the acceleration. Whether that initial thrill translates to long-term ownership satisfaction depends on whether you value the silent, instant power delivery or whether you crave the sound, the shift points, and the mechanical character of internal combustion. Both are valid. Neither is wrong. Road trips in an EV work. They also require more planning than road trips in a gas car, and pretending otherwise is dishonest. In a gas car, you drive until the tank is low, pull into any one of the approximately 150,000 gas stations in the US, fill up in 5 minutes, and keep going. The infrastructure is everywhere. The process is fast. You don't think about it. In an EV, you plan your charging stops in advance using an app or the car's built-in navigation. You stop at DC fast chargers, typically every 150 to 200 miles depending on your vehicle, speed, and conditions. Each stop takes 20 to 40 minutes to add enough range for the next leg. You factor in charger availability, potential wait times if chargers are occupied, and the possibility that a charger might be out of service on well-traveled routes with good charging infrastructure. Major interstates between major cities, the experience is increasingly smooth. The car routes you to chargers automatically. You stop, plug in, grab food or coffee, and you're back on the road. The stops are longer than gas stops, but not dramatically so, and many EV owners report that the forced brakes actually make long drives more pleasant and less fatiguing on less traveled routes. Rural highways, mountain roads, remote areas, the experience can be stressful. Charger spacing gets wider. Backup options are fewer. The range anxiety that people joke about becomes a real consideration when you're at 15% battery and the next charger is 40 miles away and you're not sure it's working. The honest road trip take, a 2 to 3 hour drive, is seamless. A 5 to 6 hour highway trip adds 30 to 60 minutes over a gas car. A cross-country trip adds meaningful time and requires real planning. Whether that trade-off is acceptable depends on how often you road trip and how much you value the daily benefits that offset it. Range is the first thing everyone asks about, and it's the first place where the conversation gets dishonest. Manufacturers advertise EPA-estimated range numbers. A car might claim 300 miles of range. That number comes from a standardized test cycle that includes a mix of city and highway driving under controlled conditions. It's a useful benchmark for comparison between vehicles, but it is not a real-world promise. Your actual range depends on how you drive, where you drive, what speed you drive, what the temperature is, whether you're using climate control, how much cargo you're carrying, what your tire pressure looks like, and whether you're going uphill or downhill. All of these factors affect range, and some of them affect it dramatically. Highway driving at 75 miles per hour will cut your range significantly compared to city driving at 35 miles per hour. This is the opposite of gas cars, where highway driving is the efficient scenario. With EVs, higher speed means more aerodynamic drag, which requires more energy, which drains the battery faster. The physics of air resistance scale with the square of velocity. Double your speed and you quadruple the drag force. An EV rated at 300 miles of range might only deliver 220 to 240 miles at sustained highway speeds. Cold weather is the other big range killer. Lithium-ion batteries are less efficient in cold temperatures. The chemical reactions inside the cells slow down, reducing the battery's ability to deliver energy. On top of that, heating the cabin in winter requires significant energy. Unlike a gas car, which uses waste heat from the engine for free, an EV has to power a resistive heater or heat pump using battery energy. In extreme cold, below freezing, range can drop by 20 to 40% or more depending on the vehicle and conditions. A 300-mile car might deliver 180 to 220 miles on a bitter January morning. This doesn't mean EVs are useless in cold climates. People in Norway, one of the coldest countries in Europe, buy more EVs per capita than anywhere else on Earth. They just plan for the range reduction and have robust charging infrastructure. But it's something you need to know going in, because the number on the sticker is the best-case scenario, not the everyday reality. Hot weather also affects range, though less severely. Running the air conditioning draws energy from the battery, and extreme heat can reduce battery efficiency slightly. But the impact is generally much smaller than cold weather. The honest answer on range, if the manufacturer says 300 miles, plan for 220 to 270 in real-world mixed driving and 180 to 230 in worst-case winter highway conditions. If that covers your daily needs with a comfortable margin, range isn't a problem. If it doesn't, it's a real consideration. Charging is where EV ownership either works beautifully or falls apart completely. And which one it is depends almost entirely on one thing: whether you can charge at home. If you have a garage, a driveway, or a dedicated parking spot with access to an electrical outlet, home charging changes the entire EV equation. You plug in when you get home. You wake up with a full battery. You never go to a gas station. You never wait in line. You never stand in the rain holding a pump. Your car charges while you sleep, the same way your phone does. The cost of electricity to fill up an EV at home is typically equivalent to paying $1 to $2 per gallon of gas in energy terms, depending on your local electricity rates. It's dramatically cheaper than gasoline. A level 1 charger, a standard 120-volt household outlet, adds about 3 to 5 miles of range per hour. That's slow. Painfully slow. If you drive 40 miles a day, it would take roughly 8 to 13 hours to replenish on level 1. It works for light commuters, but it's the bare minimum. A level 2 charger, a 240-volt outlet, the same kind your dryer or oven uses, adds roughly 20 to 40 miles of range per hour depending on the vehicle and charger amperage. This is the sweet spot for home charging. Plug in at 6 p.m., wake up at 6 a.m., and you've added 200 to 400 miles overnight, more than enough for almost anyone's daily driving. Installing a level 2 charger at home typically costs $500 to $2,000, including the charger unit and electrician labor, depending on your electrical panel's capacity and how far the wiring needs to run. DC fast charging, level 3, is the gas station equivalent. These are the public charging stations you see at highway rest stops, shopping centers, and dedicated charging plazas. They pump energy directly into the battery at high power levels, adding 100 to 200 plus miles of range in 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the vehicle, the charger's power output, the battery's state of charge, and temperature conditions. Fast charging is what makes long road trips possible in an EV, but fast charging has caveats. It's significantly more expensive than home charging, sometimes approaching or exceeding the cost of gasoline per mile depending on the network and pricing. It's slower than filling a gas tank, even at its fastest. The infrastructure is still being built out and isn't uniformly reliable. Broken chargers, occupied chargers, chargers that won't connect to your car, and long waits are all real frustrations that EV owners deal with. And frequent fast charging generates more heat in the battery, which can accelerate degradation over time. Most manufacturers recommend using fast charging as a supplement, not a primary charging method. Here's the honest split. If you can charge at home, the charging experience is better than gas stations. It's cheaper, more convenient, and you start every day with a full tank. If you can't charge at home, if you live in an apartment, park on the street, or don't have access to a dedicated outlet, EV ownership becomes significantly harder. You're dependent on public charging infrastructure that's improving but not yet reliable enough to be seamless. This single variable, home charging access, is probably the most important factor in whether an EV works for your life right now. The battery is the most expensive component in an EV. It's also the one people worry about most because batteries degrade over time, and that concern isn't unfounded. But it's often overstated. All lithium-ion batteries lose capacity over time in charge cycles. The chemical reactions inside the cells gradually become less efficient, and the maximum amount of energy the battery can store decreases. A battery that delivered 300 miles of range when new might deliver 270 miles after 5 years, and 240 miles after 10 years. The rate of degradation depends on several factors: how often the battery is fast charged, how often it's charged to 100% or discharged to near zero, the temperatures it's exposed to, and the specific chemistry of the cells. Most EV manufacturers recommend keeping the battery between 20 and 80% state of charge for daily use. Charging to 100% and discharging to near zero puts extra stress on the cells. This doesn't mean you can never charge to full. You absolutely should before a road trip. But doing it every day for years accelerates degradation. Think of it like stretching a rubber band to its absolute maximum every single time versus stretching it to 80%. The band lasts longer with less extreme use. Real-world data on battery degradation is increasingly available and mostly encouraging. Studies of Tesla fleets have shown average degradation rates of roughly 10 to 15% over the first 200,000 miles. That's better than many people expected. A car that started with 300 miles of range still having 255 to 270 miles after 200,000 miles is a very usable vehicle. EV batteries also come with substantial warranties. Federal law requires manufacturers to warranty EV batteries for at least 8 years or 100,000 miles. Many manufacturers exceed this. Some offer 10 years or 150,000 miles. If your battery degrades below a certain capacity threshold within the warranty period, the manufacturer replaces it. That's a significant safety net. The replacement cost of your outside warranty is the scary number. A new EV battery pack can cost $5,000 to $15,000 or more depending on the vehicle and battery size. That's the number EV critics love to cite, and it's real. But context matters. Most EV batteries will outlast the rest of the car. The likelihood of needing a full battery replacement within a typical ownership period is low for most drivers who follow basic charging practices. The honest take: battery degradation is real, it's measurable, and it's something you should understand. But for most owners, it's not the catastrophe the internet makes it out to be. Treat the battery reasonably. Avoid constant fast charging. Avoid keeping it at 100% all the time. Avoid extreme temperatures when possible, and it'll retain the vast majority of its capacity for the life of your ownership. This is the question that matters most to most people, and the answer is, it depends, which is unsatisfying. But let's run the actual numbers. Purchase price. EVs generally cost more upfront than comparable gas cars. A base model gas sedan might start around $25,000 to $28,000. A comparable EV sedan might start around $35,000 to $42,000. That's a significant gap. Federal tax credits, currently up to $7,500 for qualifying vehicles, can close the gap substantially, and some states add their own incentives on top. But not every EV qualifies for the full federal credit, and your personal tax situation affects how much you actually benefit. The sticker price advantage still belongs to gas cars in most segments. Fuel costs. This is where EVs start winning. If you charge at home, electricity costs roughly 3 to 5 cents per mile in most parts of the country. A gas car getting 30 mpd at $3.50 per gallon costs about 11 to 12 cents per mile. That's roughly a 60 to 70% reduction in fuel cost. On 12,000 miles a year, that's a savings of roughly $800 to $1,000 annually. Over 5 years, $4,000 to $5,000. Over 10 years, $8,000 to $10,000. If gas prices are higher or your gas car is less efficient, the savings grow. If you rely on public fast charging, the savings shrink significantly. Fast charging rates vary widely, from $0.30 to $0.60 or more per kilowatt-hour depending on the network. At the higher end, the per-mile cost of fast charging can approach or even match gasoline costs. Home charging is where the economic case lives. Maintenance. EVs have significantly lower maintenance costs than gas cars. No oil changes, no spark plugs, no timing belt, no transmission fluid, no exhaust system to rust. The brake pads last dramatically longer because regenerative braking does most of the stopping work. The main maintenance items on an EV are tires, cabin air filters, wiper fluid, and eventual brake fluid changes. The savings are real. EV owners typically spend 30 to 50% less on maintenance over the life of the vehicle compared to a gas car. However, tires are worth mentioning. EVs are heavy, battery packs add significant weight, and the instant torque delivery is harder on tires. EV owners often find they replace tires more frequently than they did on gas cars. The cost difference isn't dramatic, but it partially offsets the maintenance savings. Insurance. EVs often cost more to insure than comparable gas cars. The higher purchase price, the expensive battery pack, and the specialized repair requirements all factor into higher premiums. This varies by vehicle, location, and insurer, but it's a real and often overlooked cost. Depreciation. This one is evolving rapidly. Early EVs depreciated aggressively because the technology was changing fast and buyers worried about battery longevity. More recently, some popular EVs have held value reasonably well, but the market is volatile. Price cuts from manufacturers, Tesla has done this multiple times, can instantly devalue inventory. The long-term depreciation story for EVs is still being written. Total cost of ownership. When you add it all up, purchase price minus incentives, fuel costs, maintenance, insurance, and depreciation over a typical 5 to 10 year ownership period. EVs often come out ahead for people who drive a lot, can charge at home, and qualify for tax credits. For people who drive fewer miles, can't charge at home, or buy EVs that don't qualify for incentives, the math can favor a gas car. There's no universal answer. You have to run your own numbers with your own variables. Anyone who tells you EVs are always cheaper or always more expensive is oversimplifying to make a point. Zero emissions is the marketing tagline, and it's technically accurate. At the tailpipe, an EV driving down the road produces no exhaust emissions, no CO2, no NOx, no particulates, no carbon monoxide. The local air quality benefit is real, especially in dense urban areas where tailpipe emissions from millions of cars create genuine public health problems. But zero emissions is not the full picture. The electricity that charges the battery has to come from somewhere, and in much of the US, that somewhere includes natural gas, coal, and other fossil fuels. The mix varies dramatically by region. If you live in an area where the grid is powered primarily by renewable energy, hydro, solar, wind, nuclear, your EV is genuinely close to zero emissions in total. If you live in an area where the grid is heavily coal-dependent, the emissions are lower than a gas car per mile, but not zero. They've just been moved from the tailpipe to the power plant. On average, across the US grid as it exists today, driving an EV produces roughly 50 to 70% fewer life-cycle greenhouse gas emissions than driving a comparable gas car. That's a significant improvement, but it's not zero. And as the grid gets cleaner, which it is, steadily, as coal plants retire and renewable capacity grows, the EV advantage gets bigger over time. An EV bought today will get cleaner every year without you doing anything, because the grid it's plugged into is getting cleaner. Then there's the battery manufacturing question. Producing lithium-ion batteries is energy-intensive and involves mining lithium, cobalt, nickel, and other materials. Mining operations, particularly cobalt mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo, have documented environmental and human rights concerns. The carbon footprint of manufacturing an EV battery is significant, typically equivalent to several years' worth of driving emissions for a gas car. This means an EV has a higher carbon debt at the time of purchase, which it then pays off through lower operating emissions over its lifetime. How long does that payoff take? Most life cycle analyses estimate that an EV breaks even with a comparable gas car on total life cycle emissions within roughly 20,000 to 40,000 miles of driving, depending on the grid mix, the vehicle, and the battery size. After that, every mile driven in the EV is a net emissions reduction compared to the gas car. For a car that'll be driven 100,000 to 200,000 miles over its lifetime, the total reduction is substantial. Battery recycling is another factor. Currently, EV battery recycling infrastructure is limited but growing. The materials in EV batteries, lithium, cobalt, nickel, are valuable and recoverable. As the first wave of EVs reaches end of life, recycling operations are scaling up. The goal is a circular economy where materials from old batteries feed into new ones, reducing the need for virgin mining. We're not there yet, but the trajectory is positive. The honest environmental take: EVs are meaningfully better for the climate and local air quality than gas cars in almost every scenario. They're not perfect. Mining is messy. Manufacturing has a carbon cost. The grid isn't fully clean, but the net environmental benefit is real and growing. The charging network in the US has grown rapidly but still has significant gaps. As of now, there are tens of thousands of public charging stations across the country, with numbers increasing monthly thanks to federal infrastructure investment and private build-out, but the distribution is uneven. Urban areas and major highway corridors are relatively well served. Rural areas, smaller towns, and certain regions, particularly in the central US, have sparse coverage. Charger reliability is also an ongoing issue. Studies of public charging networks have found that a meaningful percentage of chargers are out of service at any given time due to software issues, hardware failures, vandalism, or payment system problems. Pulling into a charging station and finding the chargers broken or occupied is a real and frustrating experience that gas car drivers never deal with. You don't pull into a gas station and find that 3 of the 4 pumps are out of order. But that happens at charging stations more often than it should. The good news is that this is improving. Federal funding is accelerating build-out. Major networks are investing in reliability. New standards, particularly the adoption of Tesla's NAS connector as the industry standard in North America, are reducing compatibility issues. The charging experience in 2025 is meaningfully better than it was in 2021, and it'll be better still in 2028. But for someone buying an EV today, the infrastructure is good enough for most people in most situations, rather than as seamless as gas stations everywhere. Based on everything we've covered, here's an honest breakdown. An EV probably makes sense for you if you can charge at home. This is the single biggest factor. If you have a predictable daily commute within the vehicle's comfortable range, if you qualify for federal and state tax incentives that close the price gap, if you do most of your driving locally with occasional road trips on well-served corridors, if you want lower fuel and maintenance costs over the long term, if you're comfortable with the charging planning that road trips currently require, an EV probably doesn't make sense for you right now if you can't charge at home and would depend entirely on public infrastructure. If you regularly drive very long distances in areas with limited charging coverage, if you need a vehicle for heavy towing, EV towing range drops dramatically under load. If your budget can't absorb the higher upfront cost even with incentives, if you live in an extreme cold climate and need maximum range reliability without margin, none of these are permanent disqualifications. Infrastructure is expanding, prices are dropping, battery technology is improving, cold weather performance is getting better. The list of people for whom an EV makes sense is growing every year. Here's something the EVs are too expensive crowd often misses. The used EV market is getting very interesting very quickly. Early EVs and even some recent models have depreciated aggressively. A combination of rapid technology improvements, manufacturer price cuts, and buyer uncertainty about battery longevity has pushed used EV prices down significantly. You can find used EVs with 40,000 to 60,000 miles, well within battery warranty coverage, at prices that compete with or undercut comparable used gas cars. A used Chevrolet Bolt, for example, has become one of the best value propositions in the entire used car market. Low purchase price, decent range, cheap to charge, minimal maintenance needs. It's not glamorous. It won't win any design awards. But as a daily commuter, the math is hard to beat. Used Teslas have fluctuated with each round of new vehicle price cuts, creating opportunities for buyers willing to shop the secondary market. Other brands, Hyundai, Kia, Ford, Volkswagen, are adding used inventory as their first-generation EVs come off leases. The key when buying a used EV is battery health. Ask for the battery health report or have the battery state of health checked by a qualified shop. A used EV with 90% battery health and 50,000 miles at a meaningful discount to a new one is potentially the smartest car purchase available right now. The remaining battery warranty transfers with the vehicle in most cases, giving you additional peace of mind. The used EV market isn't for everyone, but it dramatically changes the affordability argument. If the upfront cost of a new EV is the barrier, a used one might be the answer. And the fuel and maintenance savings start compounding immediately from a lower purchase price. EVs replace engines with electric motors powered by lithium-ion battery packs. They're over 90% efficient versus 25 to 35% for gas engines. Real-world range is typically 70 to 90% of the advertised number, less in cold weather and at highway speed. Home charging is cheap and convenient. Public fast charging is less so. Battery degradation is real but manageable. Most batteries retain 85 to 90% capacity after 200,000 miles. EVs cost more upfront, but save on fuel and maintenance. Total cost of ownership favors EVs for high-mileage home chargers. Environmental benefit is real, but not zero impact. Life cycle emissions are roughly 50 to 70% lower than gas cars. Charging infrastructure is growing, but uneven. Whether an EV works for you depends on home charging access, driving patterns, budget, and climate. Electric cars are not the savior. They're not the scam. They're a genuinely good technology with real advantages, real limitations, and a real set of conditions under which they make sense or don't. The EV cult wants you to believe they're perfect. The anti-EV cult wants you to believe they're useless. Neither cult has done the math for your specific situation because your situation isn't their argument. Their argument is their identity. Do the math yourself. Can you charge at home? How far do you drive daily? What incentives are available to you? What's your electricity rate? What's your gas budget now? Run the numbers for your life, not someone else's talking point. The answer might be an EV. It might be a hybrid. It might be a gas car for now, and an EV in 3 years when infrastructure and prices improve. Any of those answers is fine. If this video gave you actual information instead of tribal arguments, hit like. Drop your daily commute distance in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many of you could switch tomorrow without changing anything. And subscribe so you stop getting your EV opinions from people who've never charged one and people who've never paid for gas. Later.